There is a moment, captured on video, where a car begins to move in a way that your brain refuses to process correctly. It is not accelerating. It is not turning in the conventional sense. It is rotating. On the spot. All four wheels working in a kind of coordinated intelligence. The vehicle pivoting like a compass needle, finding true north. No drama. No smoke. No struggling. Just a machine doing something that machines, by every rule you were taught, are not supposed to be able to do. And then it dances. Not metaphorically. Not as a marketing phrase. The vehicle moves in deliberate, rhythmic, choreographed motion, weight shifting, direction changing. The whole body of the car responding to a sequence that looks less like engineering and more like performance art. People, watching in person, people watching the footage online, argue about whether it is real. And somewhere in a development facility in Wuhu, China, a group of engineers already know the answer to that argument. They built it. They tested it hundreds of times. To them, the dancing car is not a miracle. It is a result. But to understand why that result matters, you have to understand where it came from. And that story starts much earlier and much quieter than most people realize. Chery Automobile was founded in 1997 in Anhui Province, China. If you are not deeply embedded in the global automotive industry, that name may not carry much weight for you. That is not an accident of history. For years, Chery operated in the background of a global conversation dominated by German engineering, Japanese reliability, American muscle, and Korean value. Chery made affordable cars. Chery sold into emerging markets. Chery was too much of the Western automotive press. A footnote. But footnotes have a way of becoming the main text when nobody is paying attention. While the legacy brands were managing their existing platforms, refining what already worked, protecting what they had already built, Chery was doing something different. They were investing in research, not licensing it, not acquiring it through partnership agreements, building it internally from the ground up with a specific goal in mind. Not to catch up, to skip ahead, the technology that makes the dancing car possible is called a distributed drive system, combined with intelligent torque vectoring and an all-wheel independent steering architecture. Those words strung together may sound like a press release. What they mean in practice is this: each wheel on the vehicle can receive a different amount of power at a different moment, in a different direction, all simultaneously, all controlled by a system fast enough to make thousands of micro adjustments per second. The result is that the car does not move the way a conventional car moves. It moves the way a living thing moves. With intention, with precision, with a range of motion that rewrites what you thought the word vehicle meant. On the spot, turning the zero-radius pivot that first makes audiences go silent is one expression of this system. To execute a true zero-radius turn, you cannot simply have four-wheel steering. You need the front wheels pulling in one rotational direction while the rear wheels push in the opposite. All while torque is being distributed in a way that keeps the vehicle stable, keeps the tires from destroying themselves, and keeps the whole maneuver smooth rather than violent. It requires the kind of cross-system coordination that takes years to develop and longer to trust. Chery's engineers trusted it enough to perform it publicly, on camera, in front of crowds. That is a very specific kind of confidence. But what happened next changed everything, because the engineers did not stop at the pivot. They took the same system, the same distributed intelligence, the same wheel-level control, and they asked a different question. Not, can we turn in place? But what else can this do? And the answer, when it was demonstrated for the first time, was not what anyone expected. The car danced. A sequence was programmed, or perhaps choreographed is the better word. The vehicle moved through a series of directional shifts, weight transfers, and rotational patterns that, when set against music, became something that felt intentional in a way that went beyond function. Left, pause, right, rotate, slide, center. The crowd watched. Some filmed it, some just stood there. Because there is a moment when you watch a piece of engineering do something beautiful, where the technical explanation becomes temporarily irrelevant. You are not thinking about torque vectoring. You are just watching something move and feeling something about it that you did not expect to feel about a car. That footage spread, and the reaction split almost perfectly down the middle. Half of the people who saw it were amazed. The other half were skeptical. Accusations of CGI, claims that it was a concept vehicle with no production relevance. Dismissals framed as analysis. And this reaction, the split itself, tells you something important about where Chery sits in the global consciousness right now. They are at the exact moment in a brand's trajectory where what they are doing is real enough to threaten people, but not yet famous enough to be automatically believed. That is a specific and historically significant place to be, because every brand that is now unquestionable was once here, was once demonstrating something that half the audience refused to accept. The question is never whether the technology is real. The question is whether the story catches up to the capability before the window closes, and then came the water. If the dancing demonstration was the moment that made people argue, the amphibious driving footage was the moment that made people go quiet in a different way. A vehicle, not a modified experiment, not a purpose-built watercraft, but a vehicle in the Chery development lineage, drove down a ramp and entered water, and kept going. Forward momentum maintained. Stability held. The transition from road surface to open water handled not as a crisis, but as a condition. Just another environment. Just another set of inputs for a system designed to adapt. Amphibious capability in a vehicle is not new as a concept. Military vehicles have had it for decades. A handful of civilian experiments exist. What is new here is the context. This is not a military contract. This is not a billionaire's novelty purchase. This is a technology demonstration from an automotive group that is simultaneously showing you it can make a car dance and make that same car float. The implication is not subtle. The engineering ambition behind this is not pointing toward a niche product. It is pointing toward a platform, a way of thinking about what a vehicle is and what it should be capable of. That is fundamentally different from the way the legacy brands are thinking about it, and here is where the story becomes impossible to ignore. These were not concept cars in the traditional sense. Concept cars are promises. They exist to generate headlines and gauge reactions, and occasionally, partially, become something real years later. What Chery demonstrated were production direction vehicles, machines built on architectures that are actively being developed for consumer release. The gap between what was shown and what will be sold is not the gap between a dream and reality. It is the gap between a finished chapter and the next one being written. That distinction matters enormously, because it means that the brand's watching this footage, and they are watching it. Inside boardrooms in Stuttgart and Tokyo and Detroit are not watching a science fiction trailer. They are watching a competitor's roadmap, and the roadmap is ahead of where most of them publicly expected Chery to be. There is a particular kind of silence that happens in a competitive industry when someone does something you did not anticipate. It is not admiration exactly. It is recalibration. A rapid internal reassessment of assumptions, timelines, strategies. The question shifting from what are they doing to how long have they been doing it and what else have we missed. That silence is happening. Now, Chery exported over 1.1 million vehicles in 2023. They operate in over 80 countries. Their Omoda and Jeku brands are actively expanding into European and Middle Eastern markets with a speed that has caught established players off guard. The technology showcase is not separate from the commercial strategy. It is the commercial strategy. The dancing car is not entertainment. It is a statement of capability delivered in a format that bypasses technical jargon and lands directly in the gut. You do not need to understand distributed torque vectoring to feel something when a car rotates in place with the precision of a ballerina. You do not need to read a spec sheet to be affected by watching a vehicle enter water and keep moving like it was always meant to. Chery understands something that a lot of legacy brands are still learning, which is that in the current information environment, demonstration is more powerful than documentation. Showing is more credible than claiming, and a single piece of footage shared across platforms, carrying genuine human surprise in the reactions of the people watching it live, is worth more than a decade of press releases. The engineers who built this system did not do it to go viral. They did it because they had a vision of what a vehicle should be able to do, and they refused to accept the conventional limits. The virality was a consequence, not a goal. And that is an important distinction, because goals change when circumstances change. But a refusal to accept limits tends to compound over time, which brings you back to the beginning, to that moment in the footage where the car starts to move in a way your brain, refuses to process correctly. You have been watching cars your entire life.